Welcome friends, come on in. Let's explore where truth begins. Here inside, shining bright, wisdom grows as we unite. Let's open doors to heart and mind. Let's shine the light.
Hi, this is Susan Pitcairn and
Richard Pitcairn.
welcome to our show, Open Doors, where together we explore the mysteries of life and what it is to live in freedom. If you enjoy this kind of content, please like and subscribe. Thanks. And now for today's show. Hi, this is Susan and Richard Pitcairn, and we often like to have little dialogues and conversations between us on subjects of interest, and we each have a concern, and have since the beginning of this whole pandemic, that people have a misunderstanding about what science is and what it's capable of and how well it's being done.
Mm-hmm.
So it's become kind of like a new religion, like the religion of science. Like, we follow the science, that's why we're going to get the shot, or that's why we social distance, that's why we wear the mask and so on. When the truth is that if you look past the censorship and so forth, that's really outrageous right now, that there are plenty of studies that either don't prove those points or show the opposite. So like we both studied, statistics and how you can lie with statistics and how to design experiments and so forth. And just to give an example that you've sometimes talked about in your lectures on vaccinations and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is true also for things like mask mandates and lockdowns. You can see a graph like this, kind of from your point of view, where a disease is moving along, an infectious disease,
Over
and
time.
it starts coming down, and then somewhere close to the end of it, they institute some intervention, whether it is, these mask mandates or lockdowns, or whether it's vaccines, or, even with historical disease outbreaks. Then it continues to go down. But if you just look at this little small part of that graph, it looks as though the intervention's what made a difference. Here's an example with the polio death rate in the UK and in the US from 1920 to 1970. When the vaccines were introduced in the late 50s, you can see it where the green line is. It just continued on its downward decline. But if you just looked at the last part of the chart after the intervention, you'd think that the shots made all the difference. Another way to lie with statistics is to not show the important ones. For example, look at this chart that shows the difference between Florida, New York, and California. Even though they had quite radically different policies, everybody was freaked out about Florida opening. Really, their curves were pretty much the same. If anything, it was better in Florida. Or here you can compare 5 different states that had quite different times that they instituted mask mandates, or in one case they lifted them, and yet their curves for a number of hospitalizations per 1 million were almost exactly the same. It's like it made no difference. Somehow they're forgetting to show us this part of the data because it doesn't fit the narrative they want us to see. So that's an example.
Mm-hmm.
There's other ones too, like you had a situation when you were doing work in graduate school with mice. You want to talk about that a little bit? Variables.
Yes.
Like
I was studying viruses, and I won't go into the details of the study, but it had to do with the immune system and how it recognized things.
Mm-hmm.
And we use what are called inbred mice.
Mm-hmm.
They're all the same genetic makeups, presumably.
Yeah. Right.
And they were all kept in the same upstairs attic area, same food in cages.
I tried to make everything the same, so
Yeah,
it would be
so
a valid piece of
the
research.
idea is that the ideal study is you remove as many variables as possible.
Right.
So one day, after I'd been working in this way for quite some time, because I did the program for 6 years, I don't remember how long ago, how long after I started, but it was, after some years probably.
Mm-hmm.
I go up there for some reason to the attic with mice, where I find half of them are kept in the dark.
That must have been a surprise. And
my gosh.
And as it turns out, the exposure to light is a really significant thing
sunlight.
for health,
There were windows in one half of the room and not in the other half.
Right. And so likewise, when I was studying social psychology in graduate school, I was in a PhD program, And I was looking at scientific methodology. They were talking a lot about, in those days, about experimenter expectancy effects. It's kind of like a placebo effect with a patient taking a drug. It's like an experimenter, a scientist, sets up a design and they think something's going to happen, and it's much more likely that that's what happens.
Or it's more likely what they see,
Yeah, or it's what could be what they see.
how they interpret
Yeah,
it.
and then you pile onto that also the sheer number of variables that would really be reasonable to account for. Usually they try to match pairs, like, okay, here this group the test group has an 80-year-old, so many of those with, who have comorbid conditions, and this one has the same number, and this group has so many 40-year-olds that are healthy, and this one has the same number, and you have matched pairs, kind of. That's very difficult. Ideally, that's very difficult to do. And one time when I was considering designing an experiment in social psychology, I looked at maybe, I don't know, it was 12 or 15, 20 variables I really should account for. And it turned out I'd have to have like 35,000 subjects, and it just wasn't going to happen. So that was enough to make me actually drop out of that level of science, at least, when I saw that it really was not feasible to do it according to what I felt needed to be done.
It's not that it couldn't be, it just would take a lot more care and work and make the whole study more expensive. So they don't do it. They
Right.
just, if they're going to test a drug, they just take two groups of people,
Right.
and those groups can vary.
Right.
With, for example, probably a lot of the drugs are tested in groups of people where they never evaluate what else they're
Right.
taking.
Professor I had at the time was saying that medical research, he was from Harvard, that medical research is really one of the sloppiest types of science that's done. And I think one of the reasons for that not only is because it's inherently complex, there's inherently so many variables that affect health, but also there's a motive there. It's usually sponsored by pharmaceutical companies who have something to gain from a certain drug or treatment or surgery or whatever it might be. In fact, it's been coming out in recent years that some editors of major medical journals are saying they don't trust the science in their own journals anymore. Former editors of a prestigious medical journal warn of corrupt and weak science in most articles. And we've seen, like, Lancet, a major medical journal, retracted a study that was totally falsified this last year. So when people say, trust the science, or I'm taking the jab because, I trust the science, like, why wouldn't you do that? You have to realize that this is a mantra. It's like a propaganda that's being repeated 24/7, and you have to look at who's behind it. So if you want to take an intelligent look at it. And so there's politics in this, and there's money in it. So if you do the homework, you'll find that 40 to 70% of the ads on mainstream television are paid for by big pharma, which stands to make, billions or trillions off these shots, and it could go on for years. And then the Gates foundations have their fingers in so many different public health sectors and so forth, and he's not even a doctor. And it's like, it really makes people like us question these things. And one of the things we wanted to say also was that all this has been kind of weaponized. So people who are just trying to share this kind of information are being put, censored, and are being described as being, evil, essentially, false, that they're, early on I heard a spiritual teacher actually say that it was criminal the way some, experts in public health and epidemiology were questioning all this. What a strong language to use. So I think that the fear that has been created by this 24/7 media has created so much bias in our ability to look at things objectively, as well as people's general ignorance about science and how it's done, and how it's not really done that objectively, and how a lot of research is biased in favor of whoever sponsors it.
Doesn't it seem to you like an obvious thing that if a drug is developed, that who should test the drug is not the company that developed it?
Yeah.
Because they obviously have a motive. And
as people say, a lot of the agencies that we think are protecting us, the FDA or whatever, they're captured agencies. The people who run those go back and forth between being CEOs of big medical pharmaceutical industry kind of companies, and so you can't. Same with environmental things. You can't expect them to really honestly regulate this.
So it's really an illusion to have that belief.
Yeah,
isn't
so
it?
it is. I mean, and I think a lot of people have some inkling of this, and yet because of the fear that's being put out, they say, well, I'm just following the science, Okay, maybe they'll make some money off of it, but this is what the science is telling us, and the science has become like a religion, hasn't it? It's a dogma, and it has a top-down
belief
aspect to it. It's like like a what would you call it? Like a
cult.
A cult, and it's like a guild of special professionals who have, and there's a whole sociology of medicine that you can study, that they have their norms, their mores, the things they're supposed to do, the rules they're supposed to follow, their hierarchies, and deviating from that has its consequences. So there's not a lot of objectivity in that.
If we had an intelligent process in our society, medicine or whatever could bring out their ideas, but then we're free to look at it and discuss it. But when you have what is presented to you as a belief, and if you do question it, you're chastised,
you're anathema,
or you're punished.
It's like
that is not intelligent.
No, it's not, and it's not science. It's not the Age of Enlightenment. It's not what science was supposed to be. The way we were taught that when we were younger, and we believed in it, and we thought it was a good thing. We were said, okay, you make a hypothesis, then you test it objectively, then you see if it can be repeated, other people can repeat it, and it's a good idea. It's just that there's so many biases that enter into that, and so much political and financial corruption that has destroyed a lot of it, especially when it comes to things that can make money.
Yes.
It might not be true for something like geology or something, but it for not to do experiments so much as probably with geology, but with medicine, there's so much money to be made. It's a life and death thing, and it really appeals to people's fear. I mean, it makes people really easy to control.
Well, and the fear can be exaggerated as a way of doing that, right? They can say, okay, there's, as they do now, there's this virus, and oh, it's so dangerous. And it's really not, as it turns out. But they'll tell you it is, and then that will increase your fear, make you more susceptible to the belief.
Right.
Right?
Right. So one of our major concerns is, we have a fear too. Only the fear that we have is not so much that we're going to get sick or have the virus, because we know we're going to get sick at some point and die. That's just part of life, right? And it's not that serious a condition if you look at the data. What we're afraid of is the loss of our freedoms and the loss of our constitutional rights to free speech, freedom of assembly, and just things we've taken for granted, like the ability to breathe freely that isn't even in the Constitution. But it's a natural law. It's a natural right. And so what we would like to ask, our appeal to the world, if you will, is for people to consider, when they very kindly, in a way, say, I'm doing this for the greater good. I'm making a sacrifice. I'm doing this for you guys. I'm doing it for Grandma. I'm doing it because they tell us to do it, and it's the right thing to do. To consider, wouldn't it be a much greater good to think about how you could support freedom in your world, to support people's choice, to support unity so we don't weaponize these things against each other, like, oh, you're a masker, you're a non-masker. Wouldn't it be a kinder, gentler, and more socially proactive thing to do to promote that?
Yes.
Yeah.
There'd be less suffering.
Yeah, we appreciate you're trying to be kind, but think about the overall big picture, really, truly, because it's really creating a tremendous amount of fear for people like us that are looking through the cracks and seeing the potential for a world that's completely controlled, where you can move, where you can go, whether you're vaccinated or not. It's like putting a Star of David on you and sending you off to the concentration camp. For some people,
it's actually a contradiction, because a person may say that what they're doing is acting out of kindness, but what they're doing is judging you and isolating you and taking away your status or whatever.
Right.
So it's really the opposite of what's being said.
And likewise, in the 1940s, 30s, in Nazi Germany, people might have said, well, we're doing the world a favor by you know, ridding the world of this Jewish vermin, you know. And so, but that was a pretty limited view, if they held that at all. You know, I mean, what they were doing was causing tremendous suffering and prejudice. And so, in a real loss of spiritual sovereignty and well-being. So
It wasn't acting in a loving way.
no
It was
way,
such a-
never was. And
No.
so, you know, many of us see this as the same kind of thing. It may not look that way, you know, at first glance, if all you watch is the mainstream media. But if you're on the fence about this at all, we really encourage you to look at some of the websites down below in the show notes and get more informed about it. The window of opportunity to get more informed about this is perhaps diminishing because there's been a tremendous amount of censorship, which a lot of people aren't even aware of. And there are new platforms that are developing, and that's one of the good things that might come out of all this. We're going to see, amongst some people, a more empowered and freer world, I believe. And I also think that the truth has a way of coming out in the end, because it is, at some level, an orderly and beautiful universe that created all of this beautiful nature, created our bodies. And I just can't believe that universe, the creator, the source behind it, the intelligence behind it, can stay repressed forever. The truth, the love that's inherent in that source will come out and will emerge. You know, whether it's in a week, whether it's in a year, 10 years, maybe even 100 years, I hope not.
Or maybe it's always
It'll
coming
come
out,
out.
and it's just a
Yeah.
question of listening.
That's a great thing to say. It's true. That's true. Right now. It's here and now. Thank you for watching. And we wish you all the best. We wish us all the best.